Okay, so we are on Daled Amud Aleph. We are on 4a. So where we're at is, we quoted a text yesterday that discussed the amount of time this woman, this wife, who was warned by her husband, how long does she have to be secluded with the man about which she was warned for her to qualify as a Sotah? And the length is the amount of time it takes for the beginning process of intimacy, the beginning process of intercourse, which, as we explained, is the point of contact between the two organs, right at the beginning. And then the Gemara raised a number of opinions discussing exactly how long that is. And they use various different markers: the amount of time it takes to walk around the tree, the amount of time it takes to boil an egg, the amount of time it takes to eat the egg, the amount of time it takes to dilute wine, the amount of time it takes to drink wine, the amount of time it takes to put your hand into a basket and take out a loaf of bread, the amount of time it takes to take a toothpick out of your mouth. They're different descriptions. Now, what the Gemara is going to do is, the Gemara is going to quote another Mishnaic text, which does a similar discussion, which raises a number of opinions as to how long this process is, how long these man and woman have to be in the same room to qualify as a Sotah. And then the Gemara is going to compare the two lists and see if there are any contradictions or inconsistencies and try to reconcile them. So that's what the Gemara is going to do now. So you don't have to remember every single opinion that we discussed yesterday, because as the Gemara does the comparative analysis, it's going to remind us of what we learned yesterday. So we are right over here. It's the middle of 4a. Right over here, this text over here, you can see my cursor, I'm highlighting it. Viramini. And the Gemara raises an objection or a contradiction. I mentioned this before, that when the Gemara introduces a question, the manner in which the Gemara introduces a question tells you what kind of question it's going to be. So whenever the Gemara raises a question which has this root word, Rami, and in this case, Raminhi, but Rami is the root word, then that means that the question is going to be a contradiction from a text that's of the same stature as the original text. Namely, in this case, a Mishnaic age text. Other cases, it could be two verses, let's say, or it could be two statements from sage from the Gemara. In this instance, it's two Mishnaic age texts. So we had the Mishnaic age text we read yesterday, and now there's a Mishnaic age text today, which reads as follows. First, it quotes the verse, the Nistira, and the woman, after being warned by her husband, is now secluded with this man. So the Gemara, this Mishnaic age text asks, the Kama Shir Stira, how long do they have to be in seclusion? Here, says the Gemara, Lo Shamanu. The verse doesn't say anything. But when the verse goes on to say, Vihi Nitma, the verse goes on to describe first their seclusion, and then the verse describes the scenario in which they were intimate, Hava Omer. That leads us to understand that Kedei Tuma, that the length and the amount of time that that this woman has to be secluded with the man is the amount of time it takes for impurity, for intimacy, which is Kedei Bia, which is the amount of time it takes for intercourse, which is Kedei Ha'ara, which is the amount of time it takes for the beginning process of intercourse, as we explained yesterday. So far it's the same as yesterday. Now the Gemara introduces, this new Mishnaic age text introduces various different opinions as to how long this process of the beginning of intimacy actually is. So the first opinion says the Gemara is, this Mishnaic age text, Kedei Chazoras Delkel, the amount of time it takes for the returning of the palm tree. Divrei Rabbi Lezer, this is the words of Rabbi Lezer. So at the moment, the Gemara assumes that this description, the amount of time it takes for the returning of a palm tree, is the same thing as described yesterday, where it takes the amount of time for someone to circle a palm tree. Right, literally it means returning palm tree. What does returning palm tree mean? So at the moment, the Gemara assumes it means the same thing as going around the palm tree. And this is Rabbi Lezer's opinion. Rabbi Shua says, Kedei mizig es hakos, the amount of time it takes to dilute wine. As we explained yesterday, wine back in the day came directly from the vat, in which case the wine is very dense and very thick and undrinkable. And in order to drink it, you have to dilute it with water. And the amount of time it takes for one to dilute water, to dilute the wine using water, is the length of time required for this woman to be with the man to count as a Sotah. That's the amount of time it takes for the beginning process of intercourse. Ben Azai says, the amount of time it takes to drink that cup of wine. Rabbi Akiva says, the amount of time it takes to, I've been saying boil an egg, but that's not correct. I should say fry an egg. Boil an egg is much longer. You have to boil the water, but frying an egg is much quicker. You have a hot pan and you pour the egg onto it. It's much quicker. So the amount of time it takes to fry an egg. Rabbi Huda says, amount of time it takes to swallow that fried egg. Okay, so this is the end of the Mishnah H text. So yesterday we had a list, which is a little bit more exhaustive, a little longer. And today the list includes the returning of a palm tree, which we assume is the same thing as going around the palm tree as yesterday. Then we had diluting a cup of wine. Then we had drinking the cup of wine. Then we had frying an egg. And then we had swallowing an egg. 5 opinions today. And the Gemoro is going to go through each of these, compare it to an opinion we quoted yesterday, and see if they match up or if they seem contradictory. So the Gemoro begins with the first one. At this point, we are under the assumption, as I mentioned, that the description we said yesterday, where a person, the amount of time it takes for someone to walk around the palm tree, is the same thing as the description we said today for the amount of time it takes for, quote, the returning of the palm tree. Now, if that's the case, the Gemara raises a contradiction. Hasam Rabbi Shmuel. Yesterday, it was Rabbi Shmuel who said that the amount of time for the beginning of intercourse is the amount of time it takes to walk around the palm tree. But today, it was Rabbi Lezer who said it. So Hasam Rabbi Shmuel kadeh kafes dekel. Yesterday, it was Rabbi Shmuel who said the amount of time it takes to walk around the palm tree. And Upala Rabbi Lezer Allah. And Rabbi Lezer yesterday argued with Rabbi Shmuel. Whereas Hach over here, Rabbi Lezer kadeh chazaras dekel. Whereas over here, Rabbi Lezer said the amount of time it takes for returning of the palm tree. So it's not a contradiction. Because whenever the Mishnah H text makes a list of opinions, then each opinion must be different than the other. Otherwise, why are you listing all of them? So yesterday, Rabbi Shmuel said the amount of time it takes for a person to walk around the palm tree. Whereas yesterday, what did Rabbi Lezer say? Rabbi Lezer said the amount of time it takes to dilute wine. So again, yesterday, Rabbi Shmuel said walk around the palm tree. Today, and yesterday, Rabbi Lezer said the amount of time it takes to dilute wine. Whereas today, Rabbi Lezer is the one who says the returning of the palm tree. So the returning of the palm tree then cannot be the same thing as walking around the palm tree, because yesterday's Mishnah H text told us that Rabbi Lezer disagrees with the opinion of walking around the palm tree. Because Rabbi Shmuel said walking around the palm tree, whereas Rabbi Lezer said yesterday diluting the wine. So today, Rabbi Lezer says returning of the palm tree. So the returning of the palm tree must be some other measure, which is the same thing as diluting wine. I hope that's clear. If it's not, please interrupt me. So Abaye says in reconciliation, Hakafa beregel. Yesterday, when Rabbi Shmuel said that the amount of time for the beginning of intercourse, which is the amount of time this man and woman have to be secluded, is when he said walking around the palm tree, he meant beregel, a human being on foot. Regel means a foot, walking around the palm tree. But Chazara, when today Rabbi Lezer said the amount of time it takes for the returning of the palm tree, it's not talking about a human being returning from the palm tree, but rather beruach. It's talking about the frond. I think it's called a frond, like the leaf of the palm tree. If it's bent out of shape, when the wind blows, it takes some time for that frond, for that leaf to return back to its place. That's what he meant by the returning of the palm tree. That the palm tree, by virtue of the wind, returns back to its original proper place. And there's the dispute. Yesterday, Rabbi Shmuel said the amount of time it takes to walk around the palm tree. And Rabbi Lezer yesterday said the amount of time it takes to dilute the wine. And today, Rabbi Lezer says a different measure, and which is the amount of time it takes for the wind to push a tree, to push the palm branch back into place. So it's a different measure. Okay, so this is how we reconcile the seeming contradiction. Okay, so I hope that's somewhat clear, just to simplify it, given the answer. Yesterday, Rabbi Shmuel said it's the time frame is the amount of time it takes for someone to walk around a palm tree, whereas today, Rabbi Lezer says the amount of time it takes for the wind to restore the leaf of the palm frond back to its location. So, boy, Ravashi, sorry.
Interesting how Rabbi Lezer changed his opinion in terms of the. He said it was the dilution of wine
Yes.
initially, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. The Gemara is going to address that in a minute, but we have to assume that they're basically the same measure. It's two descriptions for the same amount of time. Otherwise, it would be a contradiction in his own statements, right? So why he gives different measures, I can't say, but we have to assume that the two measures are the same, which is what the Gemara is going to do for us in a moment. But yes, good point. Because yesterday he described it as the amount of time it takes to dilute wine, and today he's talking about the amount of time it takes for the wind to push back the frond. So we have to assume that those two time frames are the same, and the Gemara is going to discuss in a minute how to reconcile that as well. But good point.
Okay.
But before that, it says the Gemara, Boy Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi asks, we're over here, Chazara Beruach. When we said today, when Rabbi Lezer said today, the amount of time it takes for the wind to push the palm frond back into place, is it talking about when the palm frond moved out of place and now it's been pushed back into place? Or is it or is it talking about the amount of time it takes for the wind to push it, and when the wind pushes it back into place, it shakes around and then settles, which is a little bit more time? Is it the amount of time it takes for the palm frond to go back to place alone? Or do we have to also include the amount of time it takes for the palm frond to wave around and then finally settle, which is a little bit longer? Says the Gemara, Teku, we have no resolution to how many extra seconds Rabbi Lezer is talking about. Is it talking about the returning of the palm frond alone, or also the amount of time it takes for the palm frond to be waving around before it settles? No resolution to that. Okay. Now the Gemara raises Robert's point. Hasam Amar, yesterday Rabbi Lezer said, Amar Rabbi Lezer, yesterday Rabbi Lezer said that the time frame is the amount of time it takes to dilute wine. But Hacha today, Kedei Chazar Deko, he said it's the amount of time it takes for the wind to restore the palm frond. Therefore, the Gemara says, we must therefore conclude that they are both the same measure. The amount of time it takes to dilute wine is the same amount of time it takes for the palm frond to be pushed back into place, because it's the same Rabbi Lezer giving two different descriptions. He can't be arguing with himself, and we don't want to say that there's a contradiction in his own terms, so we'll say they're both the same measure. However long it takes to dilute wine is the same amount of time it takes to make for the wind to restore the palm frond. But here's the problem. Hasam Rabbi Shua. Yesterday Rabbi Shua. Now let's go to Rabbi Shua's opinion. Yesterday Rabbi Shua said, that yesterday Rabbi Shua said the amount of time, the time frame is the amount of time it takes to drink a cup of wine. But Hacha Amar, today he said, it's the amount of time it takes to dilute wine. So yesterday Rabbi Shua said it's the amount of time it takes to drink wine, and today Rabbi Shua says it's the amount of time it takes to dilute wine. So therefore we must say that yesterday when Rabbi Shua said that it's the amount of time it takes to drink wine, he didn't just mean the amount of time it takes to drink wine, but rather he meant limzoig villishtois. He meant the amount of time it takes to dilute the wine and drink it. So it's a few moments. First you got to dilute it, and then you got to drink it. Okay. So yesterday he said drink. Yesterday he said dilute. Yesterday he said drink. Today he said dilute. And we're saying what he really means is dilute and drink. Okay. Says the Gemara, well, why'd you do that? Why'd you just lengthen his time? Why not just reconcile it by saying that drinking and diluting are the same amount of time? So yesterday when he said drinking and today when he said diluting, it's the same time. Why not say that?
Yeah, that would be similar to what they did for Rabbi Eliezer.
Oh, that's right. But the Gemara says here's the problem. In Cain, if so, Hein Rabbi Eliezer, then that would be the same opinion as Rabbi Eliezer. Because Rabbi Eliezer yesterday said the amount of time it takes to dilute wine. Today he said the amount of time it takes for the palm frond to be pushed back into place. And we just said that those two things are the same. Now, if Rabbi Yeshua, which said to drink the wine, is saying the same thing as dilute the wine, then Rabbi Eliezer opinion, Rabbi Yeshua's opinion are the same thing. Because we just finished saying that Rabbi Eliezer of the opinion it's the amount of time it takes for diluting. And now if we're going to say that Rabbi Yeshua also means diluting wine, then they're the same opinion.
Yeah, but they're adding now that little extra piece, right?
And that's what the Gemara says, that Rabbi Yeshua meant is not just the diluting, but the drinking and diluting. So now there's a dispute. Rabbi Eliezer says the amount of time it takes to dilute wine, which is the same thing as the amount of time it takes for the palm frond to go back into place. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua says drinking and diluting. So now there's a dispute. Rabbi Yeshua says it's a little longer than Rabbi Lezer. Okay, so we reconciled that. Now let's go to another opinion. Hassam Amar Ben Azai. Yesterday, Ben Azai said, "Kedei litzleis beitza." The amount of time it takes to fry the egg. Hacha. Today, Ben Azai Amar. He said, Rabbi Ben Azai said, "Kedei lishtoisai," to drink wine. So today, Ben Azai said, drink wine. Yesterday, Ben Azai said, fry an egg. Says the Gemoro, they are both the same thing. Frying an egg and drinking a cup of wine take the same amount of time. Okay? So we settled Rabbi Ben Azai, which means now we have three opinions that we came up with so far. Rabbi Lezer, which says the amount of time it takes to dilute wine, which is the same thing as the amount of time it takes for the wind to push the palm frond back. We have Rabbi Yeshua, which says the amount of time it takes to dilute wine and drink wine. And we have Ben Azai, which says the amount of time it takes to drink wine alone, which is the same amount of time it takes to fry an egg. Those are the three we have so far today in reconciliation with yesterday's opinion. Now let's go to a fourth one. Hassam Amar Rabbi Akiva. Yesterday, Rabbi Akiva said, Kedei legoima, it's the amount of time it takes to swallow the egg. That was yesterday. But Hacha Amar, today he said, Kedei litzleis beisa, the amount of time it takes to fry an egg. So Rabbi Akiva is either swallow an egg yesterday or fry an egg today. So Samora says, Ema, we must therefore say, what did Rabbi Akiva mean? Kedei litzleis beisa ulogoima, the amount of time it takes to fry the egg and swallow it. So Rabbi Akiva is making it a little longer, fry and eat. Now, why not say frying the egg and eating the egg are the same amount of time? What's the problem? Because in Cain, if so, Hana Ben Azai. We just finished saying that Ben Azai is of the opinion that it's the amount of time it takes to drink wine, which is the same thing as the amount of time it takes to fry an egg. Now, if Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion that eating an egg and frying an egg is the same thing, then he's the same thing as Ben Azai, which said that frying an egg and drinking wine is the same thing.
Right, it would be the same thing.
So we have to add, therefore we have to say that Rabbi Akiva is adding. That he's adding, he's saying fry and eat. So now we have five opinions. Rabbi Lezer says the amount of time it takes to dilute wine, which is the same thing as the wind blowing the frond back. That's Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Yeshua says the amount of time it takes to dilute wine and drink wine. That's Rabbi Yeshua. Then Ben Azai said the amount of time it takes to fry an egg, which is the same thing as the amount of time it takes to drink a cup of wine. Then we have Rabbi Akiva, which says the amount of time it takes to fry the egg and swallow the egg. Did I miss an opinion? No, those are the four opinions I think we have so far.
No, that's it. That's the four.
Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Akiva, and Ben Azai. I think that's it. Yes. Now the final opinion that we've talked about today. Hassam Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseida. Yesterday, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseida said, "Kedei legoima shalosh beitzim." Yesterday, Rabbi Yeshua said, Yesterday, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseida said, it's the time frame is the amount of time it takes to swallow 3 eggs, zu achar zu, one after the other. That was yesterday. Hacha Amar. Today he said, "Kedei legoima," the amount of time it takes to swallow an egg, singular. So today he said 1 egg. Yesterday he said 3 eggs. So says the Gemoro. Okay, when Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseida said yesterday the amount of time it takes to swallow 3 eggs, the Dvor of the Rabbi Akiva Kamar, he was responding to Rabbi. Sorry.
Sorry, that was Rabbi Akiva's yesterday's.
Rabbi Akiva yesterday was
swallow an egg. Right?
Yes, right. Which today we said means to fry and swallow. Right.
Right.
Which is right to fry and swallow.
Yeah.
Right. So now that we know that Rabbi Akiva says you have to do it, the amount of time it takes to fry and swallow. So it says Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseida, l'dvor of Rabbi Akiva Kamar. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseida is responding to Rabbi Akiva and saying, the Kamar Mishalim B'tzli of Gemiya. Rabbi Akiva, which we just established, is of the opinion that it takes the amount of time it takes to fry an egg and swallow. Ema. So it says Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseida to Rabbi Akiva, why not say shir gemur l'chodei? Why are you measuring it based on frying and swallowing? Just use the measure of swallowing alone, which is the amount of time it takes to swallow 3 eggs, one after the other. Which is the same thing as frying and swallowing. In other words, Yehuda Akiva, which says the amount of time that the time frame is the amount of time it takes to both fry an egg and swallow an egg. I have a much easier measure for you. Just stick all to swallowing, and the swallowing is the amount of time it takes to swallow 3 eggs, because swallowing 3 eggs is the same thing as frying and swallowing. So Rabbi is not actually a new opinion. He's just giving Rabbi Akiva another measure, so that he's using just one measure instead of saying frying and swallowing. Just stick to the swallowing part. So, which means the amount of time it takes to fry an egg and eat that egg is the same amount of time it takes to eat 3 eggs in a row, one after the other. And there is our discussion on the 2 different opinions and reconciling them.
I thought that yesterday's opinion with Yehuda ben Beseder was swallow 3 eggs, and today's opinion was swallow 1 egg. I didn't catch that.
Today he said, right. Okay, so today his opinion is the amount of time. Okay, good point. So there is a 5th opinion, because in today Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseder is arguing, whereas yesterday he wasn't. Yes, you're correct. So today Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseder is introducing a new opinion, which says the amount of time it takes to swallow 1 egg, whereas yesterday when he said 3 eggs, he was responding to Rabbi Akiva, giving him another measure. You're correct. So there is a 5th opinion. Yes, you're right. There is a 5th opinion. So we can go through them all. So Rabbi Lezer says the amount of time it takes for the wind to restore the palm frond, which is the amount of time it takes to dilute a glass of wine. Rabbi Eliezer says, that was Rabbi Eliezer, I'm sorry. Rabbi Yeshua says the amount of time it takes to dilute and drink a glass of wine. And Azai says the amount of time it takes to fry an egg, which is the same amount of time it takes to drink a cup of wine. Rabbi Akiva says the amount of time it takes to fry the egg and eat it. Yehuda ben Beseder says today the amount of time it takes to fry 1 egg. And yesterday Yehuda ben Beseder said to Rabbi Akiva that your measure, which is to fry an egg and swallow an egg, is the same thing as eating 3 eggs, 3 in a row. That's what we have from today's text, reconciling it to yesterday's text. Even though yesterday's text had other opinions, like putting your hand into the loaf of bread to take it out, putting your hand into your mouth to take out a toothpick, and so on. Okay, so stop over here, and God willing, on Monday, the Gemoro is going to give us more analysis, a little bit more analysis on some of the opinions that we learned yesterday that we haven't touched on today. And then the Gemoro is going to get into where the sages know these things. How do they know this distance? And as I mentioned, the Gemoro is going to tell us it's because of their personal experience. And the Gemoro is going to talk about Ben Azai, who never got married, and how he knew. And then the Gemoro is going to get into an interesting discussion on promiscuity in general, based on a verse we quoted earlier. It's a wonderful day and a good Erev Shabbos, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Good Erev Shabbos.
Okay, bye.